Welcome. To special collections, as you will have noticed when you came in, there's slightly stricter rules and regulations to do with working in this area, in this space of the library, compared to outside. Absolutely no food, no drink at all, and no pens. They're the ones to remember. I always have pencils on hand. We have here three major special collections. I'll just briefly, you can have a look on our web pages for more in-depth information about the collections, but just on a brief synopsis, we've got the Gradwell collection, which is, it came from a Catholic seminary that closed in Holland, Lancashire. So very good Catholic reference works, but for your purposes, we have, it goes from 15th century, one or two manuscripts, an incunabula, and early print books as well in the file. Also the Radcliffe collection. I think everything that you see today is from the Radcliffe, and that belongs to the Liverpool Cathedral, the Anglican collection, and it was collected in the 1930s, round about when, are you okay?
Should I go get some water?
Yeah, sure, you can open that door.
No, if it's possible.
It's always the way. That door's open, but it goes in the same.
Oh, okay.
Either or. Should be open. Yes, the Liverpool Cathedral, and it was collected in the 1930s, around about when things were a bit cheaper at auction, as you can imagine in the war. And they wanted to collect liturgical texts, exemplars from the changes during the liturgy in the Reformation period. That was their aim. And then they also went to auction and bought pretty things that they saw, and things were going for a song and other things that we'll see today. The third and final collection we have is the Andrew Wall Centre for the Study of African Asian Christianity. Probably not something that you're going to use, and that's upstairs. But just so you know that if any of these items come up on the catalogue, come see me to look at the material. Okay, let's start with, first of all, when you're using this material, just be careful about what you're wearing, which I say coats, scarves. I always take my lanyard off. Anything that can dangle, catch on the pages, anything like that, just be aware of. Any dangly sleeves, things like this. That's the first thing. What I will do is just explain to you how to use these book supports, foam wedges, cushions, snake weights, in order to preserve these items, these books, to keep them in use for as long as we can. They've lasted 500 years. We want them to carry on. So these are here in order to support the books. So how you support the books depends on their binding. Now, I'm going to explain probably more than you need to know, but it just gives you a bit more knowledge about how the books need to be supported, so that you feel a little bit more comfortable in handling the material. But I will always be here to help you, to assist you to get material out and to explain how to handle specific items. So don't worry about it. I'm teaching you this today just to make you feel a little bit more comfortable when it comes to handling it. So first of all, we ask that you have clean, dry hands, and that is because we don't really want anyone wearing gloves. That's quite unusual. Well, it's people rethink. You see it on the telly, people wearing gloves, but what happens if you wear gloves is you lose the sensitivity of your fingers. In which case, when you come to turn pages, you damage the corners potentially. So it's been decided that you do more damage, physical damage, turning pages than you do with the acid on your hands. But in saying that, that's why we insist on clean, dry hands, because you want to not contaminate the pages. Also, the idea is to use these supports so that you don't have to handle material, you don't have to hold the page open, you're not forever touching it. The idea is to touch it as least amount as possible while you're looking at it. The only time you would need to wear gloves is if you're wearing nail varnish, because that can come off, which is why we ask you to remove it before you come. And also if the item in question is absolutely filthy, which we do have, well, I'll show you when we go through the vault, some items that were left and just to gather dust, and so literally are quite filthy on the outside. Also material like this is an example of what we call red rot. Now this is where the leather is just deteriorating and producing this lovely orange powder, which then gets covered everywhere, and then you transfer the dirt onto the inside pages. So you would wear gloves to manhandle the book into place, then open it and then remove your gloves as you're using the turning the pages. So we actually have a small museum vac. So part of the preservation programme is to clean some of these books, certainly before they're put into archival boxes, as you can see there, for which I get some student help, so that's always good. Okay, the three different types of binding, and I'm not going to test you on this, are, we start with flexible typeback binding. Okay. Normally if you sat, I normally had just a small space that everyone had to gather around, and so then everyone could read the cards, but a bit far away. Okay, so here we have a lovely 18th century Book of Common Prayer, and this is an example of flexible typeback binding. This is like your modern day paperbacks, where the binding is glued to the spine of the text block, but it's also flexible. So as you see, when you open the item, it bends. So that implies that most of the pressure on this book in use is on the spine, and so this is where you need support. So you just have to ensure that you use this middle bit of sponge. When you first use a book, open a book, always open in the middle, just to start with, so that it's evenly distributed on the foam like so. Then manipulate where you want to be in the book and add extra cushioning where it's needed. So for example, if then you go to the front of the book, you can see, if I take that out, you need extra cushioning at the beginning here. So extra support. Like so. It's never an exact match. All books are different sizes. These are a fixed width, but you're doing what you can as much as possible to support the book. So don't worry too much. I also like to use, for that purposes, these cushions, and certainly for very fragile items. Here we have a 15th century illuminated Book of Hours manuscript written on vellum, and I always use these cushions which create an all-round support. Also, for items, many of the items that we have in the collection have been rebound over the years, and sometimes they're very tight. So what you'll find is you can't open it very far without it feeling like it's giving, and you can tell that by touch, by feel. So if you hold it in your hands like that, you go, I think, it doesn't want to be much further open than that, in which case you can manipulate the cushion to form a steeper side to support it, like so. Okay. And then you would use the snake weight to hold the page open. Now, a word on using the snake weights. Ideally, you want to, I tend to just place over a corner if that's sufficient, maybe 2 corners on larger volumes. Try and avoid text, try and avoid illuminations particularly, and any annotations in the margins as much as possible. It's difficult because sometimes, as with this one, it's been trimmed. So the original book has been trimmed. So in fact the illuminations are going right up to the edge. But in this instance I can use this side and hold it open that way. For larger volumes it's fine to drape across the lengthways when necessary. The snake weights, this is a particularly a fairly light one. They get heavier and whatever it takes to, you know, start with a light one on a small volume and then go heavier if it's not holding the page open. And there's also longer ones for some of the larger folios, which you'll see when we look at the Ortelius, which I'll get out shortly. Okay, moving on then. So that was the flexible type back binding. What would happen if you didn't support it? And it is an unbound volume anyway, so it's not such a terrible disaster. But this is what would happen. They come apart, they break, they split down the spine. So that's a particularly bad example. Okay. The second type of binding is your rigid type back binding. So again, the spine binding is glued to the text block, but it doesn't give, it doesn't bend when you open it. So something like this, as you can see if I open it carefully, it's not giving, and it's quite sturdy, in which case, as you can maybe see, this is where most of the pressure on the book is in use, on the joint between the spine and the front board. And as you can see, it's giving bare both ends. So in this instance, you remove the middle spongy bit, and you want to make sure that the apex of the wedge is in the joint as much as you can, as much as possible. So for something like that, again opening it roughly in the middle, and if you can get it so that the wedge is in the joints, that's the best that you can do. That's the support that it needs. And then again, you're using your snake weights to work your way through. If you start at the beginning, as you'll see, you need more support at the front. Just tend to slip a bit. You don't necessarily need a snake weight, this book doesn't, but just for demonstration purposes, you'd use a snake weight. When you finish looking at this page, remove the snake weight completely, turn your pages, and then reapply the snake weight afterwards. Often people are turning the pages and leaving the snake weight on underneath, and that's not good. As you go through the volume, you'd remove the sponge at the beginning. As you go towards the end, you then need to support at the back. So again, putting more support at the rear of the book, like so. Okay. It's all a lot of common sense, really. Good. That's this one, and as you can see, an example of what might happen. Here we have a small volume where, in fact, the front and the back boards are completely loose, and I've lost the spine binding entirely. So again, worst case scenario, well, that's probably the worst case scenario. I've lost the front and back board as well, and that there's some other items like that in the vault as well. I also have a pile of boards I'm trying to marry up to books. It's a joy when you find one. And the third type of binding is your hollow back binding, and as the name suggests, when you open it, the spine binding falls away from the text block, like so. And it's designed to do that. So in this instance, again, most of the stress on the book is on the joints. So again, remove the middle bit, allow the book, the spine, to fall in the middle of the hole created. Sometimes you just have to wiggle things about, get it all set up. It's never going to happen first time round, but then if you're using it for any length of time, it's worth taking the time just to get it right for the sake of the book. Great. So as I was saying, try not to touch the page once it's open as much as possible. We have some acid-free bookmarks if you want to, mark your place, carry on and go back to something, or if you wanted just to underline rather than using your finger, you can use these instead, which might help you, especially with some of the font that are used in these books. Quite difficult to read. So yeah, that's good. Also, I have magnifying glasses. No, for very small, intricate things. Keep your workspace tidy. Again, just common sense. Don't lean on the books, write on them, don't have anything hanging up over the edge of the table, and just work to one side. Make sure you've got space for your to write, to have your laptop, stuff like that. As you can imagine, you can't photocopy this material because you can't open it flat. We only have that type of photocopier here in the library. If you wanted something professionally done, we have reprographics and they could do that for you. But what we would say is if you needed to, you can take digital photographs. You'd need to ask me first so that you fill out a form to state that you've understood it's just for your use only. You're not going to blow it up as a poster and sell it on eBay, something like that. That's what we want to make sure doesn't happen. If you want to use an image for your work, again, that is possible, and we can get high resolution images produced for you, but we just need permission from the owners, which is the Liverpool Cathedral and the Archdiocese of Liverpool in terms of the Gradwell collection. So it is a possibility. I just sort of throw that in there because you may be back with PhDs and things. Okay, yes, but no flash, please. That's good. The Radcliffe collection isn't the early pre-1800 material that we'll see in the vault that's out here for you to look at today and what you'll be working on. Isn't catalogued on the main library catalogue, but there is a catalogue, a printed catalogue, a PDF that you can download from our web pages. And so everything has a reference number that you'll be seeing, and you can have a look what else there may be. You can do Control and F and search keywords to have a look to see what there is. If you want to come back on your own at any time to look at any of the material here, just get in touch with me. My details are on the web pages again. Also, my card is available. Or just pop in when you're next in the library, make an appointment. We'd need to make sure that we've got a bit of time, so we have to make an appointment to make sure there's not a session on it.